Greg Gordon has written 3 parts that I see in the series. There may be more. How Goldman secretly bet on the U.S. housing crash. Goldman takes on new role taking away people's homes. Mystery. Why did Goldman stop scrutinizing loans it bought? I want to briefly, in the 10 minutes or less that we have left with our guest today, go over some of that. And we'll give you the latest on the shootings around the country, unfortunately, in Florida and Texas. Some new developments there. Okay, going back to Greg Gordon. Greg, you were trying to say something as we went to break.
I was just going to mention that the Wall Street firms, as you would expect them to do, hired contractors to look over pools of mortgages before they were actually purchased. And it's very interesting what happened here. I've managed to find some of the people who were looking over these loans, including a former project manager who would not be identified for fear it would ruin his career, who said that he watched as the number of loans that were reviewed in each pool, the percentage of loans, declined steadily from really 100% at the beginning to 10% or less at the end. So they weren't looking at but a small sample of the loans at the end. Then you had the problem of the reviewers. Some of these people were very experienced, have been in the lending business for 10, 20 years, and they'd look at a loan, they'd say, hey, this person is a landscaper making $10,000. This person is a hairdresser claiming $10,000 a month, and this person here is a checker at Walmart claiming $5,000 a month in income, and they're getting these big loans. But how do you justify this? We have to stop this loan because this is not legit. And they'd be told, no, we have to follow the guidelines of the mortgage lender. And this mortgage lender, this particular kind of loan, is what's known as a stated income loan. The stated income loan became known later on as a liar's loan. There was no verification of the credit qualifications.
So we had fraud engineered into the system. So here's the issue. We see Madoff go to jail. We see Ken Lay get convicted. But looking at this, it seems as if their crimes are smaller, diminutive, or dwarfed by these bigger institutional hedged frauds where they all kind of pass on the guilt to each other, and then everyone just acts stupid. And there's no Kingpin Madoff or Ken Lay, but in the aggregate, it's galaxies bigger, and you can't get rid of these people. They run the system still. I mean, are we just drifting towards destruction?
Well, I don't know whether we're drifting towards destruction, but it's clear that this was a chain of profit that began from a real estate agent through the appraiser, the mortgage broker, the mortgage lender, the securitizer, and the ratings agencies. You couldn't have done this, however, at this scale without the ratings agencies who bestowed these AAA ratings on these securities, and without Wall Street, which turned a fairly nominally sized market into a $2 trillion market.
So they're the kingpins. So the buck stops with the regulators, or
we'll see. I'm not going to get I'm not going to make any predictions what the regulators are going to do. Not after the Madoff case. We'll see whether they are willing to go in there and subpoena Goldman Sachs to find out exactly what bets and what the chronology was, the timing of all these secret bets and what they were and what people knew. Most important, perhaps, probably, what did people know while they were making the secret bets? Did they know they were peddling toxic waste and they needed to insure themselves, and that's why they bought $20 billion in insurance-like bets with AIG? Or was this just, as Goldman Sachs would put it, were they just repositioning their portfolio?
It's just mind-blowing to see something like this at this magnitude going on, and no one's been brought to justice. To add insult to injury, record profits for Goldman Sachs, record bonuses, and it's going on at these other big firms, bonuses at AIG, bonuses at JP Morgan, bonuses all around, while the real economy goes belly up and unemployment skyrockets.
That's correct. Well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see whether we get an investigation. You asked me before about the what Goldman is doing now, and it is interesting and sad to note that, like the other Wall Street firms, Goldman Sachs, this 24-karat Wall Street firm, has been reduced to going into court around the country and filing papers to seize the homes of people who borrowed on subprime mortgages and who would never have, many of whom would never have been able to get these loans if Wall Street hadn't created such a big market. Now they're losing their homes, and a lot of these people, because their credit is so filed up, will never be able to qualify to buy to get another mortgage again.
Well, it's a predatory vertical integration of the economy. Strip mining is the way I would describe it. But certainly Goldman has come out better than anybody in this. Most of their competitors are dead and gone. They've made record profits. They've got their people everywhere in every regulatory agency in the White House. And so it paid off. I mean, it looks like this paid. Looks like, why did that famous gangster rob banks? Because that's where the money was. And I guess nobody will even point the finger at them. And so I guess that's it. They win.
Let's say this in fairness. And nobody's feeling terribly fair toward wanting to be terribly fair toward Goldman Sachs because they're making so much money in this horrible climate right now, economic climate. But Goldman, this is not the only market Goldman was in, and they're very smart. They get the best and the brightest out of Ivy League schools, and they're very smart. And they make a lot of money in a lot of places. What's drawn our attention is just the fact that Goldman wasn't a small player, and they got out. They made it out safely, and nobody else really did.
And they just so happen to have all the regulators. Well, amazing. And now they're running around. You've got an investigative report on that. One of the most aggressive groups, correct me if I'm wrong, going after people's houses.
Well, there was a disturbing example. A couple named Tony and Celia Becker from San Jose. They had a 1,500 square foot house, and they took a couple of mortgages out to support a jewelry business that had been hit with wildfires and other things that happened in California, and they were having some financial problems. They took these mortgages out to free up some cash to try to keep their business afloat, and they fell behind nonetheless on the payments when the second wildfire kind of wiped out the whole area around their business. And so they discovered a clause in the mortgage that allowed them to negotiate to defer some of the loan payments, and they needed to negotiate with their lender to get this deferral. The only problem was nobody would admit to being the lender. Goldman had bought the mortgages from a subprime lender and denied that it owned the mortgages, which might have been technically true because they were stuck in a trust at the time, but they knew where they were. And this couple wrote a letter to Goldman's chairman, none other than Henry Paulson at the time, 2003, and it took 3 years before a sort of an obscure Goldman subsidiary acknowledged at a court hearing that, yes, Goldman held their mortgage. And then it took another 3 years until just a couple months ago, they finally got a concession from Goldman. Goldman gave them a new mortgage at 5% interest. Now, this couple was a novel case because they had some claims, some investment loss claims against Goldman and some other Wall Street firms, and Goldman settled up with them. But the question is, how could Goldman take so long just to acknowledge that it owned their mortgage?
Yeah, how can you – well, I mean, I've got a mortgage. And over the years, it's been sold, I think, 5 times. And then I would have them threatening me over escrow money. And I'd say, I paid that bank. And then they wouldn't say who bought it. Well, another company now has it. Send your check here. Send your check there. Make your wireless payment here. Make your wireless payment there. And then I read about, it's been on CNN where people actually own a house, but then they say paperwork wasn't filed right. And so banks come in and start repossessing. I mean, this is crazy.
It's a very common problem. A lot of these Wall Street firms did not always file papers with the local registrar of deeds. It's called an assignment of mortgage, and it makes clear who the mortgage holder is. And a lot of times they didn't file these papers properly, so many people, when they try to modify their mortgage or refinance or whatever, they run into all kinds of problems because they can't figure out, the title companies. They want to know who who has the mortgage? Who are we paying off? How are they going to get a payoff figure if you can't even figure out who owns the mortgage?
And it just goes on and on and on. And instead of more transparency, it looks like we're getting less. Well, I guess we're going to see more in this series, or are you done writing about Goldman Sachs for now?
We got a lot of leads in response to the series. We'll see if any of them turn fruitful. But I'm trying to find. I'm following a number of them right now, trying to see where they go. We'll see if we can gin up some good follow stories.
Okay, Greg Gordon with McClatchy Newspapers, award-winning investigative journalist, and I mean award-winning, breaking so many important seminal news stories. Thank you so much for spending time with us. We've been honored.
Same here. Thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you. Take care. There he goes.